The Industrial Revolution. It changed everything. From the way the world works, to how nations wage war. You might think of it as a time of new discoveries and new inventions, of steam power and the assembly line. A revolution that took place in the factories, in the mines, and on the battlefield. But there's a deeper history. The Industrial Revolution and the rise of modern warfare had roots in the depths of time. In the natural process that enriches the soil, and the scientist who duplicated it and brought horror to millions. In the prehistoric forest that died to give birth to a new form of energy. And the star-destroying metal that changed war forever.
I'm Jonathan Markley. When I was trained as an historian, we were taught to think of history as just the story of humankind. But if you think about it, there's much more to the story. We should trace our history into deep time, to the formation of our planet, our solar system, even the universe itself. In this series, we're taking a new look at important eras in human history by flashing back at key moments to show how events from deep in time, exploding stars, the clash of continents, secretly shaped the stories we thought we knew. By revealing the surprising links between human history and the deep past, we'll show how our civilization and innovations, our voyages and battles are driven not only by the decisions we make, but by physics, geology, biology, chemistry, by forces that can be too small to see, or so far back in time that the only way to understand their influence is to think in a whole new way.
Imagine what it was like when people were working here. In steel mills like this, metal was turned into tools, building materials, even deadly weapons. This place was part of the Industrial Revolution. It was an age of transformation, with men like Henry Ford, who changed the way people worked and lived. You might think the Industrial Revolution is over, but as you'll see, it's a story that's still going on. Because the Industrial Revolution is the story of energy, where to get it and how to use it. To really understand that, we have to go back, not only in time, but in space, by following that light back to its source. The Industrial Revolution really starts here, in the roaring heart of the sun. That heart is a fusion reactor about 100,000 miles across. Here, as hydrogen is transformed into helium, trillions of packets of electromagnetic energy called photons are created and released. The photons shoot outward from the solar core, but run into an obstacle course of electrons and ionized atoms. 400,000 miles of them. Getting through this logjam of charged particles takes about 100,000 years. But when the photons finally escape the sun, they then travel through space at the speed of light, covering the 93 million miles to the Earth in 8 minutes and 20 seconds. About 390 million years ago, the photons from space interact with something new on Earth. Plants. Living organisms containing a special molecule that first evolved in ocean-dwelling algae. It's called chlorophyll.
These photons hit chlorophyll. Chlorophyll takes carbon dioxide and uses the energy of light and creates, as a waste product, oxygen. And in the process, creates organic chemicals that have energy stored in them.
This, of course, is photosynthesis. For millions of years, it powers the trees of the world's first forest. These early trees had thin bark and shallow roots. Over the years, they fall, pile up, and decay. Then, around 250 million years ago, tectonic plates that are always on the move lift and fold the land. The remains of the world's first forest are buried deep in the earth. Tectonic plates shift 4 million square miles of landmass more than 3,000 miles north, forming the continent of Europe. As glaciers advance and retreat, seas fall and rise. By 7000 BC, what was once the northern coast of Europe is cut off by the sea. The former coast is now the British Isles. Britain, once a tropical land, is now a colder place, filled with a different kind of forest. New photon-powered trees, like towering pines and sturdy oaks. Trees with strong, thick trunks. Which is why they were cut down. Over the centuries, forests all across England, Scotland, Ireland and Wales are cut down and burned for fuel. When wood is heated, its atoms get agitated. The solid matter breaks down and the stored solar energy is released as fire. Medieval Britons don't know about photons, but they do know that if you want fire, you chop down trees. At the time of the Norman conquest in 1066, forests covered 15% of England. By the 18th century, almost half that forest is gone. But the trees aren't just disappearing to keep peasants warm in the winter. Trees are vital for war.
A lot of timber has been used, the mighty oak trees, for example, to construct the enormous British Navy. The British Navy was responsible for significant deforestation in Britain.
The largest warships each need 4,000 oaks. And between the end of the 16th century and the start of the 18th, Britain's fleet nearly triples in size.
So, because of cold weather and war, by the 18th century, the people of Britain are facing a real energy crisis. They have to find something else to heat their homes with, but what? As it turns out, it's right beneath their feet.
Remember the world's first forest? When it was crushed beneath the earth, the pressure heated it and transformed it.
You have sediments that pile on top, creating pressure. And this pressure created chemical reactions inside the decaying plants.
Those crushed and buried plants and trees turned into something new. And England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales are packed with the stuff. Something that looks like a rock, but isn't. Coal, a fossil of the first forest that can be used for energy. A fossil fuel, because like wood, it burns.
The key to the fact that we get our energy from fossil fuels goes back to photosynthesis.
From a deep time perspective, coal is not just the fossilized remains of ancient plants. It's a packet of solar energy, frozen in time. And because the atoms of coal are more tightly packed together than atoms are in wood, a pound of coal has at least twice the energy of a pound of wood. So at the beginning of the 18th century, the British realized they're standing on an ancient treasure trove of energy. Britain is so full of coal that early mines don't have to go that far down. In many cases, less than 100 feet down. The trouble is, there's more than coal underground. There's water. Underground aquifers constantly filled by rain or melted snow. With the stroke of a pickaxe, miners could set off a flood. Getting this new energy source could be a deadly challenge.
So that's where the story could have ended. British miners and mine owners could have given up. The Industrial Revolution might have happened somewhere else, or not at all. But then something amazing happened, and it happened in a kitchen.
Look at this kettle. A lot of people in England do just that in the 17th and 18th centuries, as coffee and tea from faraway places make boiling water a familiar sight in countless homes. One of these homes is in the town of Dartmouth, where a man named Thomas Newcomen is said to have watched, over and over, the actions of his kettle on the fire. Inside the kettle, heat agitates the water molecules. They move apart as liquid changes to gas. The gas expands, but it's trapped inside the kettle. Struggling to escape the kettle, the gas moves the lid up and down. That's what Thomas Newcomen and others saw. Steam, something that isn't solid, can move solid objects.
It may have been something like that, boiling and steeping their own tea and coffee, that triggered the genius of these early Industrial Revolution inventors. We could trap the steam within some mechanism. We could use this to drive pumps to clear the water out.
Thomas Newcomen creates a steam pump that removes the underground water from the coal mines. This makes the mines safer, so the British can dig deeper for more coal. The more steam power you have, the more coal you can dig. And the more steam power you can make from coal. From 1700 to 1850, British coal production increases more than 18 times.
By the middle of the 18th century, another kettle-watching Brit, a Scot named James Watt, transforms the steam pump into a steam engine that can be adapted to many uses, like powering mills that grind grain or weave textiles.
It's hard to overstate what an advance this was in using energy from the sun to power human work. Once, the only way to get work done was through human muscles. Then as now, our muscles access solar energy through photosynthesis. We ate plants, or animals that fed on plants. In the agricultural revolution, we added animal muscle and increased our power. First, by about 4 times. And later, by breeding bigger draft animals up to 10 times. But steam power was the real game changer.
Steam was stronger than animals. James Watt advertised his first engines as being 10 times as powerful as the horse, which is where we get the term horsepower.
About a century after those early engines, the largest coal-powered steam turbine can increase human power 100,000 times. In the 18th and 19th centuries, work, production, and energy use make the leap into a new age. The textile industry is the first to be radically transformed. As steam-powered machines replace hand weaving. Between the mid-1700s and mid-1800s, English cotton processing increases more than 29,000 times, from 1,250 tons to 366 million tons. Other products also become industrialized, and Britain's mass-produced exports increased 500% in the first half of the 19th century.
Before this, people were often making their own clothing, were growing their own food and so on. But mass production technology inside huge, unhealthy factories becomes the norm. Your job is to stand in 2 square feet of space in front of a production line. You've lost all connection with the finished product. It's become this sort of mind-numbing, repetitive task that you do over and over again for 11, 12 hours a day, often under brutal conditions. This is the way the Industrial Revolution transformed work and, in a sense, enslaved people, made them captive now to this new model of manufacturing.
Replacing an old energy source, wood, with a new one, coal, has inadvertently unleashed a steam-powered revolution. From the perspective of deep time history, this is the harnessing of the physics of the universe to create a new way of powering our civilization. Triggering this pressure change takes the heat of a fire. And it turns out the Earth's ability to sustain fire may be a very rare gift indeed.
In order to create a fire, you have to have 2 ingredients. One is you have to have the basic fuel, that is, hydrocarbons that have energy stored in them. And you also have to have an oxidizer, like oxygen. And the combination of the 2 with a spark will cause a fire.
So, no oxygen, no fire. Look at Titan, a moon of Saturn with hundreds of square miles of methane lakes. Methane's flammable, but those lakes won't burn.
One is very cold, And second of all, there's no oxygen.
We live on the only planet we know of where we can use fire to, among other things, unleash the power of steam. But steam power needs a strong material to keep it contained, and the forces of deep time have provided that material, an element that formed with our planet, part of the cosmic debris from a dead star. In fact, it's the debris that helped snuff out the star in the first place.
When you wonder, where did the elements of the universe come from? You have to realize that they came from stars. Stars are like ovens.
Nuclear-powered ovens that bake elements. The larger the oven, the more elements you get out of it.
Now, our sun is a rather small star. As a consequence, it is not hot enough to create the higher elements. Our sun can make helium and a few other light elements, but not much beyond that.
A larger star, say 8 or 10 times the mass of the sun, can bake up a lot of elements like sulfur, chlorine, calcium and others. But the more it bakes, the more lighter elements fuse into heavier ones, and the more of its fuel the star uses up.
The heavier an element is, the harder it is to cook.
Finally, like a fire of coal or wood, the star uses up all its fuel. And what's left at the core of the star?
The tremendous amount of iron.
For a star of this size, iron is the limit. The star collapses, creating a final surge of energy. The oven explodes. It's an event known as a supernova. Everything in it is scattered for millions of miles, until gravity starts collecting it and the remains of other exploded stars together, in a place like Earth, which is what happened 4.6 billion years ago.
Iron was part of the early planet as it formed. Much of our iron sank to the center of the Earth.
However, when the crust formed, the crust froze many of the elements in their position as they are today. So not all the iron settled to the center.
And that, plus impacts from iron-rich asteroids early in our planet's history, is why 5% of the Earth's crust is made up of this one metal.
Iron is stronger than copper, stronger than bronze, strong enough and heat-resistant enough to keep steam power under control.
Steam power controlled by iron made coal so valuable, so essential, that faster ways had to be found to move these frozen packets of ancient solar energy from the mines to the factories.
At first, horses were employed to drag carts of coal along rails, but that's not fast enough. So horses are switched out for steam engines.
And the railroad is born. Starting in the 1820s, trains are carrying every kind of product, as well as people, at speeds never before imagined. Consider this. In 2350 BC, Sargon of Akkad, history's first great conqueror, went to war at maybe 15 or 20 miles per hour. For 4,000 years, no one could go any faster. Not the Spanish conquistadors or any king or soldier. But by the late 1800s, Many passenger trains are hurtling ahead at up to 100 miles per hour. Trains annihilate time and distance, so that economic centres hundreds of miles apart are only hours or days away. The Age of Discovery connected the world. The Industrial Revolution speeds up those connections and forges new ones.
The railroad was critically important to industrialisation in a number of ways. They facilitate nation building, nation unification. They facilitate trade and commerce in a way that was not possible before.
For better or worse, industrialisation had transformed work and business. It was about to alter the face of war.
We see warfare on a scale not seen before with industrialisation because we've got weapons that are far more efficient and far more murderous in a sense.
The future of war arrives in 1861. The American Civil War has been called the first modern war. Hundreds of thousands of troops are handed mass-produced rifles and shipped to battlefields on coal-powered trains along more than 30,000 miles of iron rails. And along a branch of the Potomac River, a battle is fought that looks like science fiction. In the Civil War, both the Union and Confederate capitals stand on outlets of the Chesapeake Bay. Control of these waterways is a matter of life and death for both sides. In 1862, the Confederate Navy salvages a sunken Union steamship, the Merrimac, and armors it from stem to stern with iron plates. She's one of only a handful of ironclad ships in the world. Coal powers the ironclad into battle. Invulnerable to cannon fire, the Merrimac destroys 2 Union ships and disables a 3rd in the waters of Hampton Roads. But on the morning of March 9th, 1862, as the Merrimac closes in for the kill, she's confronted by another coal-powered ironclad, the Monitor. Built by the Union in response to early news of the Merrimac, fire! The Monitor is the most original vessel in the world at that time. As people from north and south watch on opposite banks, the 2 ironclads clash. After 4 hours, the Merrimac has driven off. It's a strategic victory for the Union. But that isn't what makes the world sit up and pay attention. This is. 1 ironclad defeats 3 wooden warships in quick succession. But when 2 ironclads fight it out for 4 hours, there isn't a single fatality on either side. The world understood that the wooden warship, after 3,000 years, was suddenly yesterday's news. No more floating forests. Iron and steel will rule the waves. And with metal navies, the industrialized nations conquer the world. In the Age of Discovery, Europeans conquered overseas countries for gold and silver. With the Industrial Revolution, there's even more incentive to colonize. In the 19th century, one of the reasons Belgium colonizes the Congo is for its coal, and France conquers Algeria in part for its iron.
There's no doubt that one of the great motivators of the age of imperialism, if we can call it that, is to acquire resources all around the world, and also to acquire captive markets to sell their manufactured products back to.
While the Industrial Revolution spurs wars of conquest around the globe, the second part of that revolution is about to begin on a country road in the United States. It involves a steam engine and a teenage boy who will come to represent the industrial age. This is young Henry Ford, and his story is a perfect example of the surprising connections between apparently unrelated events in history. Because he wouldn't be here in Michigan in 1876 if not for something that happened 300 years earlier in the mountains of Peru.
So the potato in South America gets exported to Europe in the 16th century. It's a good entry-level crop for poor farmers, which is why it gets established so effectively in Ireland.
But in the 1840s, blight devastates Ireland's potatoes. 2 million Irish starve, and another million flee for foreign shores. One poor Irish farmer, William Ford, ends up in Dearborn, Michigan, where in 1876, his 13-year-old son Henry first sees a steam engine moving on its own iron wheels. Henry Ford is inspired to someday build a moving machine of his own. But as Ford grows up, he realizes that his machine won't run on coal. Coal was beginning to seem old-fashioned and inefficient. Despite coal-powered steam engines being central to the Industrial Revolution, at least 80% of their energy was wasted. In coal-driven steam trains, as little as 5% of the power goes to the wheels.
For the sort of what we might call almost the second wave of the Industrial Revolution, where a new sort of form of energy is required.
There was a new form of energy available. Like coal, it's something the planet had been building up since the time of the dinosaurs. But while coal is basically crushed plants, this resource is mostly what's left of small marine creatures like plankton called diatoms. Like plants, they store solar energy. And when trillions of dead diatoms are crushed and heated by millions of years of underground pressure, something new is created: petroleum.
And starting in the mid-1800s, a byproduct of petroleum, oil, gives the Industrial Revolution the energy boost it needs. Just as coal is more densely packed with energy than wood, so petroleum is more densely packed than coal. In fact, it has around 50% more energy per pound. Adding to its efficiency, it's more easily stored and can be transported through pipes instead of by train. With oil, a ship's boiler can be smaller, but the ship can go farther. And the oil product gasoline is the essential ingredient for a European invention that spreads around the world: the internal combustion engine. It takes 90 tons of crushed diatoms and other fossils to make 1 gallon of gasoline. Ford doesn't invent the internal combustion engine or the automobile. But his gasoline-powered cars will dominate the early 20th century and put an end to humanity's 3,000-year dependence on the horse for personal mobility. But the automobile would be almost useless without another material.
Another vital resource for the Industrial Revolution was the development of rubber.
Rubber is essentially a form of tree sap. And like so many useful molecules, it evolved as a nasty-tasting defense mechanism for plants against predators.
People eventually realized, particularly after it's vulcanized through this particular process, that it has tremendous applications to industry in various ways.
The internal combustion engine makes the automobile possible, as long as it can ride on rubber tires. Imagine going on a road trip with steel rims. Not a pleasant thought, is it? Even more important, rubber molecules block one of nature's most powerful forces: electricity. So rubber can be wrapped around wires and power cables. The industrial world becomes electrified, thanks to the molecule that evolved as a defense mechanism in plants.
By looking at things in a new way, by using natural resources that have been waiting under our feet for eons, like gifts wrapped up by deep time history, humans changed the world in 2 short centuries. Newcomen's first practical steam pump was built in 1712. Wind the clock forward to 1914, and what do we see?
A world where Henry Ford has transformed the 19th century factory floor into the 20th century assembly line. A new combination of human and mechanical energy that will soon increase Ford's output 10 times. Meanwhile, annual coal production has increased from 3 million tons to 300 million tons. And annual oil production has gone from nothing at all to close to 400 million barrels. And despite brutal working conditions and an increasingly polluted environment, by the beginning of the 20th century, life expectancy is rising in the industrialized world. The population of Europe triples since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. But this industrialized Europe is lurching towards a war, the likes of which the planet has never seen. A war that hinges on another product of the deep past: nitrates. A key ingredient in gunpowder and explosives, often created by explosive blasts of lightning. Electrical discharges 5 times hotter than the surface of the sun. And when lightning strikes, it creates a chemical reaction in the air.
Most of Earth's atmosphere is nitrogen molecules, N2. But lightning, which is an electrical discharge, separates the nitrogen molecules into the individual atoms. Nitrogen atoms love to combine with oxygen, and they form nitrates. The nitrates then get dissolved in the water droplets in the air. They come raining down. They get fixated into the soil. That then gets used by plants.
Amazingly, the same nitrates that can blow things up also fertilize the dirt where plants grow.
So in a sense, we owe our existence, because we eat plants, to lightning.
In the early 20th century, industrial nations seeking fertilizers and explosives looked to distant deserts, where ancient storms have left huge amounts of nitrate-rich deposits, leaving behind this: caliche, the mineral with the planet's highest natural concentration of nitrates.
In 1914, at the outbreak of World War I, Germany's explosives industry depends on caliche from the Atacama Desert in Chile. The British Navy moves swiftly to blockade Chile, cutting off Germany's supplies. But Germany has an industrial-age solution: the Kaiser's army turns to science and a patriotic chemist named Fritz Haber, one of the most important individuals of the 20th century.
Haber had recently done something really extraordinary. He found a way to use nitrogen in the air and ammonia to create artificial nitrates, the basis for a century of synthetic fertilizers that revolutionized agriculture.
Applying industrial technology, including industrial fertilizers and so on, to increasing food productivity around the world to try and bring an end to poverty, or at least alleviate that somewhat.
Haber's goal is to feed the world. But the German High Command knows that his artificial nitrates can be used to kill people. Without artificial gunpowder, Germany might have had to surrender within months. Thanks to Haber, the war can go on for 4 years. This isn't Haber's only contribution to the war effort. He also uses his skills as a chemist to develop the defining weapon of the First World War. Poison gas. Haber sees no difference between killing with gas and killing with explosives. But his wife Clara, also a chemist, is horrified. Three weeks after the first use of poison gas in war, Clara Haber takes her own life. The next day, Fritz Haber leaves Germany to supervise the first use of poison gas against Russian troops on the Eastern Front. World War I becomes famous as the Poison Gas War. But this is also the war where gasoline plays a vital role in the engines of tanks, airplanes, troop transport vehicles, submarines, and zeppelins. In just half a century after the Civil War, weapons have become far more destructive and energy intensive. One artillery shell flies over no man's land with 1,000 times the energy of a bullet at Gettysburg. It's an industrial age war in every sense. Even the choice of battlefields. For example, the German army is determined to occupy and control the southern part of Flanders because it's the source of 80% of France's coal.
A lot of the strategic decisions that are being made during these wars are decisions to either acquire resources or cut off potential enemies from being able to acquire these resources.
17 million dead, soldiers and civilians. Maybe twice that number wounded, including my own grandfather. In a way, those deaths are as much a part of the Industrial Revolution as the First World War.
The idea of industrial progress survived the war, but just barely. Science and technology had been used by Fritz Haber and others to devastate a generation.
Soon, industrialized warfare would reach frightening new heights in the Second World War.
Planes and tanks rolled off assembly lines in staggering numbers. There were new technologies from radar to rockets. Both sides used Ford's industrial practices to make weapons production as efficient as possible. Both sides use Haber's artificial nitrogen to make explosives. And another raw material created by deep time is turned into the ultimate weapon of war. Remember how supernovas create iron? The remnants of supernovas can create something even more amazing.
You start with a supernova. After the star explodes, what's left? The corpse.
The stellar corpses are called neutron stars. With the immense mass of a sun condensed into an object no bigger than Manhattan Island. And every now and then, in the depths of space, these superdense objects meet.
When two neutron stars collide, you get a tremendous explosion, which we call a gamma ray burst. And in this explosion, very heavy elements like uranium can be produced by nuclear reactions.
Like iron, uranium was part of the Earth as it formed, an element packed with 3 million times the energy of coal. President Truman called the weaponization of atomic energy a harnessing of the basic power of the universe. As for Fritz Haber, he died before the Second World War began, but his legacy lived on. Haber had helped develop a pesticide called Zyklon B, which was used after his death to murder millions of Jews, including some of Haber's relatives. And yet Haber's nitrogen formula, for which he shared the Nobel Prize, helped feed millions and then billions. At least 40% of the people alive today directly owe their lives to the food grown with artificial fertilizer. More than that, 80% of the nitrogen in the tissues and muscles of everyone on Earth today came from food grown with Haber's process. Haber's name isn't as well known as Henry Ford's, but his influence on humanity has been at least as great, for good and ill.
Their legacies and the legacy of the Industrial Revolution are still all around us. Think about this. Between the Agricultural Revolution more than 10,000 years ago and the eve of the Industrial Revolution, human numbers increased from 5 million to almost 1 billion. But per capita wealth, the wealth available to each human had barely increased at all. And then, an energy revolution. By the outbreak of World War I, per capita GDP had increased by 250%. And today, 7 billion humans, but with an average wealth per person that's 10 times that of the pre-industrial world. That's why they call it an industrial revolution, because it changed everything. You could say that the Industrial Revolution started when 18th century Europeans needed a new form of energy and found it in natural resources that had been there forever but could suddenly be used.
But the Industrial Revolution would have been impossible if not for the subatomic particles at the heart of the sun. The ancient forests that were turned into storehouses of solar energy. And the metal that helped kill a star and gave life to cars, ships, and buildings. Stages of the multi-billion-year assembly line of deep time history.